Okay, hi guys. This is our third unit of the course, Metabolic Processes. So this is just a quick little introductory slide that has a few terms that we're going to be using throughout the unit. Now on this PowerPoint, every time you see a pencil, that's something that you should write down to take this as a note. So metabolic processes, what is this unit all about? Metabolic processes are how we get our energy from our food. So we're going to be diving deeper into cellular respiration and how that actually works. How is it that the food you eat becomes energy that's available for, your muscles and your nerves and so on. Now, that's going to be a pretty complicated process, but over the next 3 weeks, we're really going to focus on two. We're going to do cellular respiration and photosynthesis, but it's going to take a little bit of time to understand that whole process. So this first week, we're going to just be doing cellular respiration. So two terms that we're going to be using a lot in this unit are metabolism and energy. So what do we think metabolism and energy actually mean? We hear about people who have a fast metabolism or slow metabolism, and we hear about energy in a few different contexts. When we're talking about biology or physics or chemistry, we're always talking about energy. So what do those two terms mean and how do they relate to each other? There's a good summary video on metabolism and nutrition that Crash Course does, so I'll put that one up on the site, and it's worth watching as we start to get our heads wrapped around these terms. So what is energy and how do we get it? There are different types of energy that we talk about in biology. There's kinetic energy, potential energy, bond energy, and free energy. So energy is always the capacity to do work, or energy is needed as the ability to do work. So kinetic energy is energy from motion. Potential is stored energy. So if you were in the physics class, you remember that potential energy, is something that we say, if you have a ball on the top of a hill and it hasn't rolled down that hill yet, it has potential energy because that energy is stored just in the fact that it's up so high on that hill. But in biology, we have other forms of potential energy, like bond energy is a form of potential energy. Now that's the energy that's either required to break a bond or form a chemical bond, say in the nutrients that we eat. Once we release that energy and it's available to the body to do work, we call it free energy. So free energy is the energy from a chemical reaction that is available for doing work. So these are two words you may have heard before. The types of reactions that happen in metabolism are either catabolic or anabolic. What do we think those terms mean? So anabolic reactions are when we build molecules up by using up energy. So here's a diagram showing anabolism or anabolic reactions where we take some smaller molecules and we use a little bit of energy and we build them up. Things like when we, synthesize new strands of DNA or we make new proteins in transcription and translation. Those would be anabolic reactions. Now, catabolic reactions are the opposite. When we take a larger molecule and we release a bit of energy by breaking that larger molecule down. So catabolic reactions would be things like when you, after you've eaten your food and you're digesting it, and you're breaking down those larger macromolecules like those starches, we're breaking them down into simple sugars. Those would be catabolic reactions. And so the body is constantly breaking things down and using those nutrients to build up new products. At the same time, energy is being released or used up. So this really complicated network of breaking things down and building them up and transferring energy between molecules, that's what we call metabolism. Another type of reaction that we're going to talk about is a redox reaction, which is a new one for us, but if you're in the chemistry class as well, we're going to be talking about redox reactions in one of our units coming up. So a redox reaction is actually just a short form for saying an oxidation and a reduction reaction. So a chemical reaction in which the oxidative states of atoms are changed. So the oxidative state is the degree of oxidation or the loss of electrons. So we have a couple of diagrams here that helps explain that. A loss of electrons, or in this case, a loss of hydrogen atoms, is an oxidation reaction. So here the glucose and the oxygen, which makes carbon dioxide and water, that's our cellular respiration equation that we've seen before. The glucose here is losing some hydrogens when it becomes 6 molecules of carbon dioxide. With those hydrogens would have come electrons, so that's considered an oxidation reaction. Now, the oxygen from the cellular respiration gained those hydrogens, and with those hydrogens came electrons, so that's a reduction reaction. So an oxidation and a reduction reaction always have to happen at the same time, because if one molecule loses electrons, another molecule has to gain electrons. So a mnemonic you can use that I think is pretty helpful is Leo the lion says grr. And Leo stands for loss of electrons is oxidation, and the GER, G-E-R's, gain electrons is reduction. And since oxidation and reduction always happen together in pairs, that's why we call them redox reactions. Okay, another type of reaction, and another term we're going to see is exergonic and endergonic reactions. So this may look familiar for those of you who are also in the chemistry class. Exergonic reactions are chemical reactions that release energy, and endergonic reactions are chemical reactions that require energy. And these diagrams here, for example, this one's exergonic, where the reactants have more energy, they're higher up on that curve than the products. So the amount of energy that gets released from an exergonic reaction is the difference in the energy from the reactants to the products. This is really similar to those exothermic and endothermic reactions that we just did in chemistry if you're also in the chemistry class. Now an endergonic reaction is the opposite. The products have more energy stored in their bonds than the reactants, so it takes energy in order to build up those products, and then this is the amount of energy that's required, or the amount of energy that's absorbed in an endergonic reaction. Okay, we've also got two different forms of cellular respiration, aerobic and anaerobic. So what do those two terms mean? You've probably heard of things like aerobic exercise and maybe anaerobic bacteria, but what does that mean? There's a good video as well that Crash Course does on ATP and respiration, which is a good summary of metabolism as well, which I'll put on the site, and that's also worth watching for review. So aerobic and anaerobic respiration. Aerobic respiration is the one we're typically seeing when we talk about cellular respiration. Glucose and oxygen making carbon dioxide and water and some energy. So that one uses oxygen in order to produce energy. That's why it is aerobic. Aerobic means using oxygen. Anaerobic means without oxygen. So without oxygen, we have another process where we can still take in glucose, but without oxygen, we produce something called lactic acid and energy. So it does not use oxygen to produce energy, and we'll talk about some of the consequences of that a little bit later on.